When night falls and sound withdraws, the archive remains. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. Dusk alters surfaces before it alters shapes. Color withdraws from height first, thinning the upper air while the ground retains a muted remainder of warmth along soil and stone. The change is not a scene. It is a recalibration in how edges hold, in how texture is readable for a moment and then becomes unreadable, depending on the angle that light chooses and the density the air carries at that hour. A path extends forward, compacted by repetition rather than design. Packed earth holds pressure as density, not as a visible imprint, but as firmness that resists the toe. Small stones sit half embedded where gravity has lowered them and friction has kept them from shifting. The surface is not smooth, only stabilized. Along the sides, grass rises without symmetry, leaning where wind has pushed it, growing taller where shade persists, thickening where light remains longer. The path does not correct the grass. The grass does not erase the path. They share a boundary that is not drawn, only maintained by contact and time. The stones embedded in the path did not choose their depth. They arrived at it through the accumulation of footfalls above, each step pressing slightly, each season of moisture softening the soil around them by fractions. The stones that protrude now are the ones that resisted. The ones that sit flush were pressed in more completely. The path is a record of force applied repeatedly across the same surface over time, and the record is legible only underfoot, only through the difference between resistance and yield. At the end of the gradual narrowing, two vertical posts stand. A horizontal beam rests across them, and another beneath it, the lower line carrying a curvature so slight it becomes legible only in relation to the horizon behind. Wood supports wood. Load travels downward through joinery shaped so that compression alone sustains contact. The structure persists by fitted planes meeting and continuing to meet. Rain has entered this wood many times. Moisture has swelled fiber, then retreated. Expansion has occurred. Contraction has followed. The surface records these exchanges as darkened channels where water lingers and lighter patches where it dries quickly. Grain remains visible because light still arrives at an angle that can describe it. When light grows flatter, the description fades even though the wood does not change. The upper beam projects slightly beyond the posts. Projection is not ornament. It is distribution made visible. Extension that counters weight concentrated toward the center. Stability becomes legible through proportion. Nothing in the form insists on significance. The wood simply holds the span it was shaped to hold. No door occupies the opening. No hinge interrupts the air between posts. No latch proposes closure. Absence here is structural, framed air. Air passes through without negotiation, and the opening remains open because nothing has been introduced to replace it. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. Sound reduces gradually. Cicada vibration withdraws. Layered frequencies become fewer, and distance changes character. Quiet is not the elimination of sound. It is attenuation, less interference between events. A bird crosses overhead once. Wings displace air. The shape recedes. The sky remains. The structure does not respond. Continued position is its only action. Breath enters. Breath leaves. Between the two, no instruction is issued. The interval holds. The sky above the frame continues to change while the frame does not. The upper beam holds its position as the color behind it shifts from pale to deeper. The posts remain vertical as shadow climbs from the ground upward. The relationship between frame and sky is not fixed. The sky is a different sky every quarter hour. Yet the frame continues to read as frame because its geometry persists through the change. Structure remains legible when color and texture have already gone. What endures last is proportion. Approach modifies rhythm before intention forms. Gravel near the posts yields underweight differently than packed earth. The shift in sound adjusts pace before thought intervenes. Perspective enlarges the frame. The posts do not grow. Distance reduces. Beneath the upper beam hangs a rope, fibers twisted into thickness. The rope carries torque within its twist, a latent tension that remains even when the rope hangs slack. Paper streamers attach at intervals along it, cut into angular forms. When air is still, the strips hang vertical, edges aligned with gravity. A current passes. Air presses against paper surface. Paper bends. Gravity restores. The cycle completes without residue, leaving no trace except the possibility of repeating again. The paper of the streamers has been cut, not torn. The cut edge is clean, a line made by blade rather than by fiber separating under tension. That cleanness is intentional, not for appearance, but because a clean edge responds to air more predictably than a torn one. The geometry of the cut determines how air presses against it. The angle of the fold determines how the strip returns to vertical. Each streamer is a small instrument calibrated by its making. The ground before the posts remains soil and stone. Beyond the posts, soil and stone continue. No elevation change signals entry. No threshold stone interrupts continuity. Yet orientation shifts because the posts establish coordinate. Left and right become explicit by uprights. Above and below are implied by span. Before and after appear once passage beneath becomes possible. Unmarked ground becomes measured interval. Crossing occurs without announcement. Footfall continues into footfall. No new sound appears beyond the same friction between sole and gravel. No gravity changes. Yet relation changes because a frame has been placed into movement. Without the frame, walking is walking. With the frame, walking acquires position, approach, passage, continuation. The shift happens without language. Beyond the frame, trees stand at irregular distance from one another, trunks rising vertically in quiet correspondence with the posts. Branches interlace overhead, dividing remaining light into fragments. Illumination no longer arrives as a field. It arrives as pieces shaped by absence. A patch of brightness on the ground exists only because leaves did not occupy that exact arrangement above. Light describes gaps with precision. A stone basin rests to one side. Stone absorbs heat slowly and releases it slowly. Water occupies the cavity, held by the basin's boundary and by cohesion among molecules. The surface remains flat until a leaf descends. Contact transfers energy outward in rings. The rings meet the stone edge and return inward, diminishing through friction and dispersion until stillness resumes. Motion exists briefly. Containment persists. The water in the basin is cooler than the air above it by early evening. The surface tension that keeps the water flat also keeps it from evaporating quickly. The water and the stone and the air above are in slow exchange, heat moving from warmer to cooler. moisture moving from surface to air. And this exchange will continue through the night until temperatures equalize and the rates of transfer slow towards stillness. The basin is not passive. It is a slow system, proceeding without observation. Nearby, metal hangs as a bell, suspended but untouched. Metal contains potential resonance determined by thickness and diameter. Without impact, vibration remains unrealized. The quiet includes unrealized vibration as part of its structure, the way a closed drawer includes an unopened page. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between breaths, the interval does not fill itself with meaning. It remains an interval. The path behind retains a faint openness, a horizon still readable as distance. The space ahead becomes layered, depth defined by trunks and the gaps between trunks, by darker planes behind lighter ones. The frame stands between these densities. It does not transform one into the other. It makes their difference perceptible as relation. Moss grows at the base of one post, not the other. The difference is not symmetry failed. It is condition recorded. One side receives more moisture from the slope of the ground, or more shade from the canopy angle. And moss responded to those conditions without consulting the other post. The asymmetry does not diminish the frame. It makes the frame a specific frame in a specific place, subject to specific conditions. A frame without asymmetry would record nothing about where it stands. Evening deepens by subtraction. Wavelengths diminish in sequence. Reds retreat first. Blues linger longer in upper air. Gradation replaces contrast. The posts lose grain and become tonal shapes defined against lighter sky. Silhouette simplifies structure to proportion. 2 uprights, 1 span, air between. A lantern near a wooden structure is lit. Flame exists within glass. Combustion converts oil to light and heat. Glass disperses intensity, reducing glare. Light reaches the lower beam and is absorbed into wood fiber, warming the surface slightly where photons are captured, leaving reflection diffuse. The perimeter of illumination extends only as far as photon density exceeds the threshold at which texture can be distinguished. Beyond that radius, detail collapses into uniform shadow. Shadow is not a thing. It is a measure of reduced light. The same trunk produces different shadow edges depending on source distance and dispersion angle. Under skylight, edges remain broad and soft. Under lantern light, edges sharpen near the object and blur further away, because the source is closer, smaller, and more directional. Boundary becomes gradient. The lantern does not create a line. It creates attenuation. Wind passes through branches. Leaves respond collectively because air pressure distributes across surface area. The rope beneath the beam tightens briefly under lateral force. Then slack returns as pressure equalizes. Paper streamers angle outward, their edges catching light differently as orientation changes, then fall back to vertical. Nothing detaches. Tension resolves. The system returns to resting alignment. Temperature shifts along surfaces. Stone releases stored warmth into air gradually. Wood cools faster where exposed, slower where sheltered. Metal, if present, holds cold longer than wood. Air near ground becomes marginally cooler as convection slows and stabilizes. These changes are not mood. They are properties moving by contact and time, making relations legible through touch. sound continues to reduce. Insects circle the lantern briefly, tracing arcs defined by attraction to brightness and avoidance of heat. Their movement is irregular, but bounded by the light's perimeter. Beyond that perimeter, darkness equalizes space. No wall marks where light ends. It fades through reduction. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between the two, a pause exists that does not require naming. The pause resembles the air between posts, defined by relation rather than substance. The posts stand between two gradients, open field behind and layered forest ahead. The field darkens evenly. The forest darkens in layers. Canopy first, depth next, ground last. The frame does not reconcile these differences. It holds position where they meet, allowing contrast to remain contrast rather than becoming explanation. As the lantern's light slowly weakens, surfaces lose their microtexture first. Grain disappears before form disappears. The world simplifies by losing detail, leaving only the geometry that remains readable at low contrast. Verticals, horizontals, and the intervals between them. Night occupies the sky until stars become visible through gaps between branches. Stellar light arrives unchanged by local conditions, yet branches interrupt it. Interruption produces silhouette. Leaf against star, branch against faint sky. The same branch blocks sky from one angle and reveals it from another. Perception depends on alignment. The lantern flame shortens as oil reduces. Combustion slows. Light contracts. Glass reflects darkness more than flame. When fuel drops below sustainment, flame ceases without sound. The perimeter dissolves because the source dissolves. The forest remains. The field remains. The frame remains. The Torii stands as outline alone now. Two uprights, one span, air between. Proportion persists after detail leaves. The form remains readable because its darkness differs slightly from adjacent darkness. Contrast is enough. No inscription marks the beam. No explanation accompanies the form. Function exists without articulation. The posts neither invite nor refuse. They establish vertical. The beam establishes span. Together, they establish interval. Passage remains possible even when no passage occurs. The path remains continuous on both sides. Nothing closes, nothing opens. The wood that forms the frame continues to cool through the night. The outer surface reaches air temperature first. Interior temperature lags. The gradient between surface and interior is narrow and slow. By the deepest hour of the night, the gradient will have closed further, the wood approaching the same temperature at its surface as at its center. Equilibrium is not the end of process. It is the condition at which process slows enough to become unmeasurable. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between breaths, the interval remains stable while other relations drift. Light becomes less available. Temperature equalizes. Sound reduces toward minimal activity. The threshold does not perform transition. It makes transition readable as relation, open and layered, before and after approach and continuation, without requiring any story to justify it. Air occupies the frame without resistance. Span holds above without emphasis. Vertical stands below without declaration. The rope hangs motionless. Paper streamers remain vertical when wind no longer passes. The basin water lies flat. surface unbroken because no new contact disturbs it. The bell remains untouched, its potential resonance held as a property that need not be realized. The path on both sides of the frame continues into the dark. It does not end at the posts. It continues past them the same way it continued before them. The frame did not interrupt the path. It gave the path a position within it, a point of passage, a moment of defined relation between what came before and what continues after. That position persists in the dark even though it cannot be seen. The path knows its own continuity regardless of whether it is observed. The basin water has lost its surface detail entirely. What was a flat plane catching the last sky reflection is now a darker oval within a darker stone, distinguishable only by the slight difference in how stone and water hold the night. Stone holds it as surface. Water holds it as depth. The difference is not visible. It exists as a property beneath visibility, waiting for light to return and make it reportable. The field behind the frame has reached uniform tone. The gradations that were present at dusk, brighter where grass caught the last light, darker where the path ran in shadow, have equalized into a single field. Not emptiness, evenness. The grass is still there, each blade in its leaning position, each stone half embedded in its particular depth. The field holds all of this in darkness without displaying any of it. It waits, as all surfaces wait, for the condition that allows it to be seen again. Breath enters, breath leaves. No crossing is required, no boundary is enforced. Vertical. Span.